What does it mean to look upon each other's face? I mean, not just look into each other's eyes, but see the faint smile of joy. The subtle downward expression of disgust. The drop mouth of surprise. The blankness of despair. The human face is capable of making 10,000 expressions, some of which are obvious, and others so subtle you may not even notice. Our faces express not just emotion, how we feel, or what we are thinking. They express what is in our humanity. That humanity, which is imprinted on us from our creation, is a direct expression of God the Creator and God the man. We were made in the image and likeness of God, meaning that He gave us all of our faculties to be like Him spiritually. But also, everything He created in the physical world is perfect in its order, including the physical expressions that articulate our spirit. When you look at a stranger, you look at God's creation. You are looking at His fingerprint on us. Knowing His creations and their ordered role intimately brings us closer to knowing Him. When you smile or frown at someone, a coworker, spouse, child, a friend, or a perfect stranger, you are communicating in the ordered way God intended. When we look upon one another, we are fulfilling God's design for us and are in a participation in a communion of the physical and spiritual with one another. We were not created to hide behind a veil from one another. If hiding our expressions meant nothing, then why would God have designed us with such unique abilities? Our eyes are important too, but the eyes are useless if they cannot see what they are looking at. Just as the rest of our face would be useless if it could not communicate our sorrows and our joys. So, if to look upon one another and use the expressions of our humanity is to reflect God's will, His creation, and to ultimately be in communion with one another, then it is good and pleasing to God. So what does it mean to look upon one another when we hide our faces? Those faces that uniquely express God's will that created man. Well, it should be obvious. It separates us from each other. It separates us from being in communion with each other. It separates us from God's design for us, ultimately separating us from God. There is more than enough Holy Scripture to support the importance of the face. Of all of these passages, each one is a clue to us that His face is necessary to seek in order to be in communion with God. And that when He deliberately hides His face from us, He cuts us off from being in communion with Him. As once we were veiled from His face, Christ then came and He unveiled the face to show us the glory of God. Think about what that means for us. Think about how much connection we lose with each other when we meet with our faces covered. Do you converse more or less? Can you read them and can they read you better or worse? If you say, I talk more and can read expressions of emotion better, and I feel far more connected with my fellow brethren with my face hidden, then I would say you are lying to yourself. If we cannot even know God without the presence of His face, then how can we know each other without our own faces? What does the mask communicate to you when you encounter each other? I mean, for me, the thoughts that run through my mind is, no one looks at each other anymore. They think I'm filthy and I'm dirty and they don't want to be around me. I just want to see this person and I want them to see me. I'm forgetting what it's like to see a face. We cannot know each other like this. We cannot invert God's design for us and still be in communion with that design. The first thing we all see when we are born is the face of our loving mothers looking down at us with an expression of love. These first hours and months that follow teach our children all the subtle and unique expressions God gave us and we give to our children. Children born into this world of hypersanitation are robbed of the humanity we are charged with providing them. They lose key developmental moments to learn how to follow gaze cues, recognize identities and emotions, and learn languages. They also lose the learning of the characteristics of people they see and interact with the most. Is that what we want for our children as they grow and develop? We want their lives to be so safeguarded from any possibilities of illness that we will rob them of the most basic and natural gifts of life itself. Is that what God intended us to do? Deny the littlest among us to be in communion with humanity. And if to be in communion with humanity is to know God, what then does Jesus Christ say about causing the littlest among us to stumble from knowing God? So when we attend Mass, we are professing that we believe in God, the Father Almighty, the Creator of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, His only Son. So why then, if we profess our belief in the Almighty Creator of heaven and earth, our absolute trust and devotion to Him, His Word, the saints, and the magisterium of the Church, why do we hide ourselves from His presence? Moses spoke to God and knew Him face to face. To know God is to know His face. As David said to the Lord, "You have said, 'Seek my face.' My heart says to you, 'Your face, Lord, I do seek.'" When God hid His face from David, David was dismayed. The veiling of God's face is perceived as a profound loss, even a judgment. Then Christ lifted the veil, revealing the face of God for all of us. Now we invert what God has done for us. We cover ourselves from Him and each other. We hide ourselves away. But Ryan, what about love and charity for our neighbors? What about caring for the sick? What about obedience to authority? As of love and charity for our neighbors, a prudent man would look at the onerous and senseless requirements to muzzle our faces and our children's faces from one another in public, at work, during the holy sacrifice of the Mass, to be a one-way street. A one-way street that professes love of neighbor, so long as that neighbor bends a knee to the will of temporal authority. An authority that has used not truth, not honesty, to encourage and enforce the safeguarding of the common good. but has used shrewd tactics of coercion, deception, marginalization, harassment, and censorship. How can love and charity for neighbors exist out of such things? Is that the example Christ left us with when he preached love for our neighbors? No, this inverts the teaching of Jesus Christ. And as we have seen for over 2 years, faithful communities have been torn asunder in order to appease a false god of this world. A false god that perverted our holy images, abused his body present in the Eucharist, and inverted his teachings. Love of neighbor is inseparable from the love for God. But it does not come at the expense of the human person. The human person needs to live in society through the exchange with others, mutual service, and dialogue with his brethren. Man develops his potential. And what of the sick? I don't think there has ever been a time in history where a generation of people have been so cowardly in the face of sickness. A sickness that by all available knowledge most likely will not gravely affect you any more than the thousands of other ways to become gravely ill. We not only avoid the sick, but we have cast out those who could be sick. We have cast out those who never were sick. Christ, his apostles, and an endless list of saints have all put their hands on the sick, unafraid of death and illness. They healed and comforted the sick, unafraid because they were united to God through Christ. But we would not touch or come near for fear of being made unclean, not just to those who became ill, but to anyone who could be ill, treating each other with suspicion, even our own families. Again, inverting the teaching of Jesus Christ. And as for authority, he who resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. This is true, but it does not stand alone as an absolute. For each community is defined by its purpose and consequently obeys these specific rules. But the human person is and ought to be the principle, the subject, and the end of all institutions. And if you think what makes you human is a life free of illness and death, you are gravely wrong. Authority does not derive its moral legitimacy from itself. It must not behave in a despotic manner, but must act for the common good as a moral force based on freedom and a sense of responsibility. Authority is exercised legitimately only when it seeks the common good of the group concerned and if it employs morally licit means to attain it. Excessive intervention by the state can threaten personal freedom and intervention. A community of higher order should not interfere in the eternal life of a community of a lower order, depriving the latter of its functions. Now, has authority achieved its goals through licit means with respect to human dignity and devotion to God? Has authority behaved despotically? Has there been excessive intervention? All of what we have experienced the last few years will not come without consequence, and it is very possible that we could see this return to our beloved institutions. Because the power our secular leaders hold over us is hypnotic, And unless we turn to God and bear our scourges and carry our crosses, we will only succeed at condemning our children to that suffering. So when it returns, will we bury our faces away from each other again and give our humanity and our children's back to Caesar when demanded? If so, why? Because it's easier? Because it's safer? Because we trust in man more than we trust in Jesus Christ? Or will we reveal ourselves physically and spiritually to our friends and our neighbors? Will we use all of our faculties given to us by God to be like Him, and through our words and actions unite each other in a communion that is uniquely expressed through the face that God gave us? Only through the face is the uniqueness of the human person revealed. The devil counts on us to destroy ourselves. He can't do it himself because God won't permit him to have that power. So he plays tricks and games of deception to divide and dislodge us from each other. That's how he wins. That's how he keeps us from God, by getting us to destroy the foundations of all things pleasing to God. It's us. It's our fear and our free will that he counts on. I pray that we will be strong enough the next time the devil makes empty promises of ultimate safety at the expense of our own human dignity and humanity. A humanity that was designed by God. I'll leave you with this from St. Ignatius, speaking about recognizing the devil and his works in the physical world. Once we have exposed the infernal serpent, when, by the evil results to which his insinuations always tend, we have discovered his diabolical purpose. Note the deceptive pretext through which he began to make us listen to him. Consider how he succeeded, little by little, in changing that pure taste, that spiritual sweetness, that perfect serenity we enjoyed before. See how he endeavored to inject his venom into the soul. This study of his hateful maneuvers will render us more capable of escaping them in the future. I'm Ryan with Reclaiming the Sword. Thanks for joining me. Stay rigid.